Are we live right now?
Hello, brothers and sisters. This is James Henry with the CLC. Welcome back to another edition of CLC training. Today's training is going to be headed up by our Director of Education, Paul Boulanger, assisted with NBA nominee for Region 12, Bill Kriebel, and NBA candidate for Region 6, Walter McGregory. We're going to be talking about the subject regarding how to grieve route inspections. We're going to turn it over to Bill, Walt, and Paul Badlanger. Take it away, Paul.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are, brothers and sisters. My name is Paul Belanger, and I'd like to welcome you all to the CLC training on grieving route inspections. So I will be joined with Walt and with Bill, as James just told you, a couple of great instructors. So this inspection training is going to be a little different from a lot of the things that we see on a day-to-day basis. Most inspection trainings that we focus on teach carriers to protect their routes during the route inspection process. We're going to touch on that a little bit here today, but our main goal is going to be to provide our stewards with the tools they need to file grievances on improperly conducted route inspections. So this is going to be more centered on stewards. There's going to be some in-depth looks on improper deductions from the inspection teams and how we can fight that time back into our routes. And at the end, we're going to have some Q&As to hear from the folks in the audience. All right, so the first thing a steward should do prior to an inspection taking place is to lay the groundwork for the grievance process, and the most important first step we can take is to establish ground rules. Unfortunately, this is rarely taught to our stewards. So we're going to be digging deep into this today, and before we're done, each steward will have a framework for establishing their own inspection ground rules. We also need to commit, as part of the procedure, to try to resolve disputes as they occur. The best grievance we all know is the one that we don't need to file. So it's extremely unlikely that management will see things our way and perform a perfect route inspection because of our advice. But a Step B team or an arbitrator will appreciate and give weight to the fact that we try to avoid a grievance at all costs. One of the things we should have for our grievance investigation will be colored copies of Form 1838C, and we'll be looking at that in a minute. The red ink on these copies will tell us what changes were made by management. Another thing we'll need to remember is that in the consultations, carriers should ask for reasons for any deductions to their evaluations. This must be in writing, must be on the Form 1840 or an accompanying request by the carrier. Lastly, we need to get contact info for our route inspection team leads. We cannot underestimate the manpower that goes into a solid route inspection grievance. So if necessary, reach out to your regional office and ask for outside steward assistance. All right, moving along, there are two schools of thought on filing inspection grievances. File a grievance for every violation separately, or file one omnibus grievance. And I was told I had to tell you what that means. Omnibus means all-encompassing. So the other school of thought is to file an omnibus grievance, bringing together all of the violations that take place. We're going to choose that second option for a couple of reasons. First, we don't want the impression that we're being petty. Filing for a few minutes of lost time and taking this grievance all the way into arbitration could give the appearance that the union believes that nothing else was done improperly. If we can build a case showing that the violations were repeated and continuing, we may be able to establish that there was some intent to violate the contract. Once we do this, the remedies will increase for us. What we absolutely don't want is for our grievance to be thrown out on procedural grounds. We have 14 days to file a grievance from reasonably learning of the violation. So when is that? When's the 14 days start? Since we have asked management to correct the errors already, the last opportunity they have to do so is when they give us a final route evaluation. Our problem is, one of the arguments we should make is that the routes are not adjusted as close to 8 hours as possible, but we don't get that information until there's a 60-day review of the new routes. The only way to resolve this problem is to file two separate grievances, so that's what our plan is going to be. Our first grievance will be for every violation that took place during the route inspection process itself. This is going to be a big grievance, make no mistake, and there's going to be a lot of moving parts. Our second grievance will be relatively straightforward, that M39, section 242.122 and .613 were violated when routes were not adjusted to as close to 8 hours as possible. Now, a work-hour workload report will show us exactly what we need to know to support that claim. This grievance takes place after the 60-day review, and just for the steward's knowledge, management could argue res judicata or collateral estoppel, basically double jeopardy. They're going to say that we already filed a grievance on these route inspections 60 days ago, and we can't do the same thing again. So we're going to avoid that allegation or argument by not citing these two M39 provisions in our first grievance. So what does an omnibus grievance look like? First, as mentioned, we'll provide our ground rule agreement as evidence. Each day, we're going to go through the previous day's 1838C and 3999 data, and we'll show you what those forms are, to look for improper deductions to carrier's time and for contractual or ground rule violations. This means we will have a list each day of time deductions that we do not agree with. Now, there's going to be some deductions that are repeated or deduct a great deal of time from each route. We're going to expand on each of those in bullet points, showing the specific violations to our contract. We're also going to have the 1840B historical 8-week analysis to review. Now, this is the eighth week. The eighth week of this analysis is the week following the week of inspection. So, something important to keep in mind: you're not going to get this complete report until the week following the end of your inspection week. And we're going to go over this form too. This is going to be a tough one in a few minutes, and we're going to show you how to recognize deductions to carrier times. Showing intentional conduct by management will not be easy, but we're going to build our strongest case to do just that. And we're also going to include non-compliance with prior grievance settlements if that applies. And we're also going to include violations that take place in the actual procedure of the route inspection. And finally, we're going to look at the 60-day review grievance and what we should ask for in our grievance remedies. Now, there's a number of reasons for the union to adopt ground rules for a route inspection. Firstly, of course, we want to reinforce that we know what our contractual rights are. Management's goal is to steal time from our carriers, no matter how that's done. And it's unlikely that it is likely that they're well aware of the rules and they're just trying to get away with whatever they can. So we're going to put an early stop to that with our ground rules. There's also local memorandum and procedures that should be discussed prior to the inspection itself. I mean, some carriers may have medical accommodations to case DPS, or some routes have special instructions where they have to pick up parcels or give off handouts. We're going to go through those special exceptions as well. These are good to get out into the open before the inspection actually begins. We also learn about the things that management disputes, if any. So, for instance, if management disagrees with certain routes having abbreviated Saturday delivery, we're going to know that right away, and we can build our arguments to support our case. Ground rule meetings are important, and they should take place in a formal setting with witnesses. Management may only agree to some of our ground rules, and that's okay. You can indicate which are agreed upon and which are not somewhere on the sheet. You can either put check marks or check boxes next to each question, however you decide to do it. We do not recommend a rewrite with only the agreed upon rules. A Step B team or an arbitrator should be able to see what rules were not agreed upon by management and that we tried. Once you have signatures on a ground rule agreement, scan it into record and email a copy to the inspection team leaders. This is going to be further evidence that the agreement stands as a binding document. It's also a good idea to write in the body of that email that any changes to these ground rules will be in writing and signed for by the parties. So the CLC has provided here, following this, an extensive list of 61 suggested ground rules in this presentation. And we're going to provide that to you to reference after our training as well. To my knowledge, the NLC has never had such a thorough presentation on ground rules. I don't think they ever had at all. Now, many of these ground rules are boilerplate contractual language that reinforce our contract, so we're not going to go through all 61 of these and put our brothers and sisters to sleep. But there are a bunch that you're going to hear that management may push back on and we have to fight for. So it's a good idea to review our arguments for those. So we're going to flip through and look at those specific items a little closer. I'm going to hand you over to Walt McGregory now to discuss some of those ground rules that we should be prepared to fight for. God bless you. Walt, this is a tough subject to take on. Take it away, brother.
All right. Thanks, Brother Paul. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're logging in from. Let's get started by looking at ground rule number 2. Any information request from the NALC pertaining to the route inspection process will be handled by the inspection team leader directly. We want to identify a specific person from the inspection team that is responsible for fulfilling information requests. Accountability is important here. Blanket requests to the inspection team may get lost. Use email information requests to provide a timeline that you can refer to in the grievance procedure. Let's look at ground rule number 3. Next slide. Carriers will utilize their normal vehicle during 3999s and DOI unless it is unavailable. Jump seats will be replaced in the carrier's vehicle during 3999 and day of inspection for street inspections if management chooses to do so. If the carrier's vehicle is not available, a vehicle of the same type shall be assigned during the inspection if available within the installation. We want our carriers to use their normal vehicle type to provide the most representative inspection. Since many vehicles do not accommodate jump seats, this also can relieve the stress of having someone sitting in your vehicle and breathing down your neck during a street inspection. Ground rule number 4. It is good to have in your back pocket. NALC inspection team members or designees will be permitted to tour the plants as needed to ensure proper mail flow. If you believe the mail is being withheld at a local plant, this allows you to verify. Next slide, please. Going to ground rule number 6. Abbreviated Saturday routes will be handled as per the M39. Saturday delivery times only shall be excluded from consideration from the M39 section 221.11. The NALC and local management will specify abbreviated Saturday routes by number with any disputed routes being notated. Specified routes will not have Saturday included in their 1840B average. Abbreviated Saturday routes are commonplace where management will attempt to steal time from our carriers. The M39 clearly states that only Saturday times are excluded on abbreviated or no Saturday delivery routes. Management may try to button down an amount of closures or time needed to qualify, but that is not defined in the M39, brothers and sisters. Our argument should be that any reduction in Saturday delivery time that cannot be supported with historical records should qualify a route. Use work hour workload reports for a period of time by pay periods or months and look at the data. Realistically, 20 minutes or more of reduced Saturday time would impact an evaluation and should be argued for. We're going to go on to ground rule number 9. Carriers will count the mail and complete entries on Form 1838C on all days, brothers and sisters, except the date of inspection per the M39 section 221.131. Examiners have the right to verify the carrier's count after the carrier, have counted the mail. Examiners will count the mail on the date of inspection. Carriers have the right to verify the examiner's count. It's very key, brothers and sisters. We will see later how management will try to violate this provision to their benefit. Ground rule number 11. All mail distributed to the carrier will be delivered every day, with the understanding that only 6 days of mail is counted for the week of inspection, or the WOI. All mail distributed to the carrier's case will be delivered every day per the M39, section 221.136. Management may try to give you wording that the best attempt will be made to accomplish this. This is unacceptable, brothers and sisters. They may also claim that a verbal agreement was made with the union to curtail mail on certain routes. Once we establish that we communicate only in writing on any rule changes, their argument will fail. Next slide, please. Ground rule number 12. This will benefit the union in the grievance process. Carriers will receive a verified yellow copy of the 1838C on a daily basis at their cases. An additional copy of the 1838C will be provided to a designated NALC representative no later than the next morning. Color copies of all 1838C forms shall be provided to the designated NALC representative no later than 3 days following the conclusion of the week of inspection. Not only do we need daily records of carrier inspections, but we also need color copies of Form 1838C to find where management edits have taken place. We are being generous here in allowing management to provide the color copies after the week of inspection. You may want to try to get these daily as well. Next slide. We're going to go on, brothers and sisters, to ground rule number 15. It is often misquoted by postal management. Line 21 is acceptable entry to count unaddressed circulars per relay in the office. We don't recommend it, however, because working the mail on the street and getting the credit for a parcel tends to be more beneficial for the route evaluation. Brothers and sisters, we're going to go to ground rule number 17. This is the wash-up time. It is also a hot-button topic, brothers and sisters. Wash-up time will be in accordance with the local agreement. Credit for wash-up time will be on line item 21. This is in addition to and separate from the carrier's 5 minutes personal needs time in the office. Very important there. Your LMOU will dictate any wash-up time agreements, but it is important to designate in writing that the limits, that this will be recorded on line 21 and not part of your normal 5-minute personal needs time in the morning. Do not let management add language, such as reasonable time, to a ground rule agreement. Your LMOU speaks for itself, brothers and sisters, and reoccurring function is recorded on line 21. If you get into an argument that wash-up time is only for employees who do dirty work or deal with hazardous material, go to the NALC safety page in your grievance. List the names of all the carriers who have died from COVID or from anthrax poisoning. You may also need to research prior inspections in your office, brothers and sisters, if possible, to provide evidence of how wash-up time was counted in the past. We're still on wash-up time. Let's look at ground rule number 18, brothers and sisters. Wash-up taken at lunch, if specified in the office LMOU, shall be recorded as personal needs wash-up and shall not be deducted from the route time. One of management's favorite games, brothers and sisters, is to eliminate wash-up at lunchtime. They will claim it was a combined break or waiting time for extending the 30-minute lunch period and should be deducted. If you have a wash-up time permitted in your LMOU at lunchtime, the carrier should tell the examiner when they are going on wash-up and when they are continuing with lunch. It would be good advice for carriers to take a minute to write these times down while on their lunch break and to provide them later to their steward. Next slide. We're going to move on to ground rule number 19, brothers and sisters. Carriers will retrieve and set up scanner immediately upon their scheduled reporting time. Retrieving and setting up the scanner, turning on the carrier case light, taking stool off the ledge are all recurring job functions and will be recorded on line 21. These are recurring work functions, brothers and sisters. We do this every single day. This time should be recorded on line 21. If management argues that the scanner is being set up before you are actually on the clock, then fine. Our carriers will manually fill out the 1260 non-transactor time cards to be paid for the time and have it recorded on our inspection. We do not work for free, brothers and sisters. I'll say that again, very important. We do not work for free. Moving on to ground rule number 20, brothers and sisters. Carriers are allowed to rifle DPS mail for accuracy. This will be done on office time and recorded on line 21 to ensure that any missorted mail is distributed to the correct carrier prior to their leaving for the street. Rifling DPS is done prior to clocking on the street according to the Carrier Academy training guide. This is done so that missequenced mail gets to the right carrier prior to leaving for the street. We should fight for this on line 21. Looking at ground rule number 21, this deals with safety talks. Just remember, brothers and sisters, here that all safety talks should be on line 21, and carriers who are absent for a safety or service talk should receive it the following day and get appropriate credit. Next slide, please. For ground rule 25, if there are safety meetings scheduled, or if you have a safety officer that does daily or weekly safety walkthrough inspections of the building, and if you don't have this, you should get it started. These should continue as scheduled and be recorded on line 21. Moving on to ground rule number 26. Hold, forward, special instruction, and safety alert cards, JAR cards, will be cased daily and counted as case letter mail volume. Completion of an alert card will be credited as a markup. The EL 814 allows for the casing of hazard warning cards, forms 1766 and 1778, or a locally created form every day. Management may also have established the past practice use of alert cards to notify carriers of a delivery instruction or recent changes of address. These should be cased every day, brothers and sisters, and the carrier should receive credit for case mail pieces. We are contractually instructed in the M41 to line out recent change of address entries on Form 3982 after 90 days following the end of the month of the change. This is probably a reasonable amount of time to have our COA, or change of address, alert cards active as well. Next slide, please. Ground rule number 28. Circulars will be placed at the carrier's case. Retrieving the parcel hamper will be recorded on line 21. SPR and mail withdrawal will be recorded on line 15. Handling of parcels and SPRs by carriers and clerks will not be changed after the drawing of the random weeks by the union. We've combined a few things in this ground rule. The big argument you may see here is for getting your parcel hamper. Retrieving the parcel hamper is not just withdrawing mail, it's getting a piece of equipment that we use to load our vehicle. This is recorded on line 21, brothers and sisters. Next slide. Ground rule 30 will be a fight for us every time. Filling out form 3996, brothers and sisters, will be recorded on line 21. Routes that are properly adjusted to as close as 8 hours as possible will be over this average of 8 hours 50% of the time and will require the filling out and submission of this form. A reoccurring line item is one that takes place once a week or more often. We can look back historically, brothers and sisters, at the last inspection in this office to show that routes still exceeded 8 hours at least once per week and would require this form. We should also make the argument that if the route is adjusted to as close as 8 hours as possible, then that is an average. This means that 3 days out of the week, the route will be under 8 hours, and 3 days of the week, the route will be over. On those 3 days that it's over, a 3996 will be required of the carrier. This is a reoccurring function of the letter carriers with properly adjusted routes and should be recorded on line 21, brothers and sisters. Next slide, please. Ground rules 35 and 36 deal with supervisor interactions. We deal with supervisors every day, and unless it's related specifically to the inspection or you are talking about yesterday's football game, it is recorded on line 21, my brothers and sisters. This also covers any performance-related discussions, including time-wasting practices and welcome back meetings after an absence. The time a carrier spends reviewing the welcome back paperwork could take 10 to 15 minutes, but this should all be recorded on line 21, brothers and sisters. Next slide, please. Ground rules 42 and 43 involve fingering mail between deliveries and taking obvious shortcuts. It's good to have some safety language included in here. Ground rule number 46. Carrier XYZ will case their DPS or other exceptions as per medical accommodation agreement. Again, brothers and sisters, any special accommodations should be ironed out before the inspection begins. Next slide, please. All right, let's look at ground rule number 48. Each delivery unit will be cleaned in, cleaned out during the week of inspection, per the M39 section 221.134. We should follow this closely. There should be no mail left behind in the building on the last day of the inspection. Again, brothers and sisters, any language that management will make their best attempt to do this is unacceptable. Next slide, please. Ground rule number 54 is a good rule. A NALC designee will be included in the core adjustment process in an advisory capacity. The union should designate an advisor familiar with the routes in the zone during the core adjustments to point out lines of travel or delivery changes that just don't make any sense. These are much harder to correct after the adjustments have gone through. Ground rule number 56 is going to be another fight for us, brothers and sisters. Union steward duties will continue as normal, and if reoccurring weekly or more often, will be recorded on line 21, memorandum 00605. If you have a steward that uses union time for the processing of grievances on an average once every week, the time for these activities should continue and be recorded on line 21. M00605 spells this out very clearly, brothers and sisters. You will no doubt get into an argument that management can't do this because the steward could bid off the route and it would be improperly adjusted. We should respond that this is what minor adjustments are for. You need to fight this for the time, brothers and sisters. Warning ground rule number 58. Hold mail received in the mail for a customer will be correlated with other hold mail for the address daily and will be recorded on line 21. Accumulated hold mail will be verified as accurate once per week, and this will be recorded again on line 21, my brothers and sisters. There should be both daily and weekly entries on line 21 for hold mail. This will be excluded unless it is discussed prior to the inspection. The M00605 also references this credit for hold mail verification. Ground rule number 59. Route examiner co-leaders will meet with the union to discuss any time deletions that the union does not agree with. This lays the groundwork to show that the union acted in good faith, brothers and sisters, to resolve disputes as they took place. All right, next slide. Now let's take a look at ground rule number 60, my brothers and sisters. The union will be provided a copy of the 60-day review of the inspected routes within 1 week of the conclusion of the 60-day period following the implementation of any route adjustments as a result of the inspection. Management may give us a snapshot of the time after the 60-day period that we do not agree with. We should look at weeks, pay periods, and full months of data for ourselves. Let's go to ground rule number 61, brothers and sisters. Examiner and carriers will treat each other with dignity and respect during the inspection and adjustment process. This is per the M39, section 115.4, the JSOV M01242. This should go without saying, my brothers and sisters, but if there are aggressive examiners, and we all know that there are, who try to bully carriers during the inspection process, we will file grievances on this as well. Okay, so now we will hand this back over to Brother Paul to help us decipher some of the forms that you will see during the inspection process. Brother Paul.
All right. Thank you, Brother Walt. We have some ground to cover. So as a disclaimer, we're going to be moving right along on this material. And if you haven't dealt with route inspection paperwork before, you may have to flip back and review later when this training is posted online. And also, we're not going to get into the actual 8190 and basic filling out of the grievance forms. For the purposes of this training, we're going to assume that this is already in the steward's toolbox, and we're going to deal with instead the arguments that we need to make to be successful. Let's look at Form 1838 first. This is basically a summary of the inspection data for a particular day. It's not specific enough to look for anomalies, but we will refer to it to make sure that information was transposed correctly. The important things to recognize on this sheet are the designation in the lower left of whether the regular carrier or a replacement serviced the route. You'd be surprised at how often a day of valuable records is lost because the route's mistakenly credited to a replacement carrier. We also can see here that times for each line item are tallied, and we can verify these if they're correct later as well. Finally, we can see whether the carrier was over or under office standard, and which of those times was used. The carrier's actual time or standard time will be chosen whichever is lower, so it's even more important to get back any improper deductions to justify an increase in office time. All right, let's look at Form 1838C. This is where a steward's going to spend a lot of their time. Every minute of a carrier's office work is broken down by line item entries unless they are actually casing mail. Some of these line items benefit a carrier a lot more than others. So let's take a look at items 14 through 23 real quickly. Line 14 is signing for and returning accountable mail. This includes any time spent waiting to have this done as well in line. There's a minimum of 6 minutes time allowance for this function. Line 15 is for withdrawing mail from the hot case and from buckets or tubs. This includes cutting straps, wrappers from bundled mail, things like that. Carriers get a minimum of 5 minutes for line 14. Line 16 and collating and line 17 strapping out time. We seldom use that. We're not going to really focus on that. Line 18 is for offices that use the 10-minute office break option instead of taking both breaks on the street. Now, line item 19 is for vehicle inspections, and again, carriers get a minimum of 3 minutes for this function. If carriers use the buddy system and check vehicles together, they should be exceeding this 3 minutes easily. Line 21 is an important one for us. This is for all recurring office work. The minimum time we get on this is a 9-minute entry. Line 22 is for non-recurring office work, such as speaking to a route examiner about the inspection or waiting for mail. And lastly, line 23 is for counting mail and filling out the actual 1838C form itself. All right, let's look at an actual example of an 1838C here on the right. We filled out this form with some data that we can go through to look for deductions that should take place and should not take place, and we'll discuss how we can deal with them. First thing to look for, of course, like we told you, is the red ink. That should be any changes made by an inspection team member. Specifically, line 22 and 23 entries are deductions to a carrier's time. They should be looked at very closely. Both line 22 and 21 entries are broad categories, and the M39 states that explanations for any entries should be made in the comments section of this form. Now, if you look at the bottom right of this form, there's a large box where we see some of these comments have been registered. Just a word to the wise, stewards should get these forms daily and go through each of them every day if possible. Improper deductions should be dealt with as soon as you can. So let's look at this form and find some mistakes that management's made. We're going to stay on this slide right now, and I'm going to make a list of our findings for each day verbally with you. Then we're going to go to the next slide and show you how we've listed this out for our submission to management. All right, first we see a line 21, retrieve mail, setup scanner, lights on, stool down. This is a recurring function and subject to a ground rule agreement, we hope. This line entry was lined out for a 2-minute deduction. This is exactly how you're going to see it in the real world. Next, we see line 21B, service talk time reduced from 5 minutes to 4 minutes with no explanation. This took 1 minute from the carrier's time. Now, moving down the page, line 21D is a $39.96 submission that was deducted for 2 minutes. Now, here's a great thing. Right after that, we see a line 22C taking an additional 2 minutes from that same $39.96 entry that was just deducted already. Next, we see line 21E, wash-up time. This was changed to line 22D and named personal needs for a 2-minute deduction. This would likely be a violation of our ground rule agreement as well. Now, we also see here that the form was taken over by the route examiner and the PM in violation of the M39, section 221-131, and line 22 comments are missing from this as well in violation of M39, section 222.214. So the total improper deductions on this date was 9 minutes. So now this next slide, we took those mistakes that we just went through on the 1838C, and we noted them here, and the total of deducted time was put at the bottom of this page. My friends, we need to do this every day for every route. It's important to submit these by email to the inspection team contact. Ask for a meeting to discuss them daily. If you wait till the end of an inspection and you get 3 buckets of mail to go through, you're never going to be able to get this caught up. So when you meet with the inspection team, they may reverse some deductions, they may stand fast on others. Indicate what they decide for each, maybe with a check mark or an X, and you should compile all of these notation sheets, because at the end of the inspection, email a copy to the inspection team lead and give them one final chance to correct the disputed deductions. This email will be an important part of your grievance timeline later. Okay, moving on to the next slide. We're going to look at Form 3999. This is the street inspection of letter carrier routes. This is the actual evaluation form during an inspection. We have the same game plan here. We're going to look at daily deductions that we don't agree with, try to get them reversed as soon as we can. This form opens the door to some other resources that we're going to be requesting and accessing as well. We're going to go over those in a minute too. But let's look at some of the red flag notations that we should be looking for on a 3999. First is relay time. Relay time is not for curbside, dismount, or central delivery routes. This is important because you're going to see this on the form when it shouldn't be there. It's also not for going through markups. If relays are eliminated in an adjustment, that relay time may also be eliminated with the relays. Even if the relays are combined, we still have markups, CFS mail for those specific deliveries, so we don't want that time deleted. Look especially for excessive relay time entries before and after segments of relays. Travel time is only for park and loop routes as well. So travel within is not going to lunch location, and it's not going to a personal need stop. This is not an immediate deduction, but time can be eliminated in the core route evaluation, so we need to watch travel within time very carefully. Waiting other is a deduction we'll see a lot of. There should be explanations for each waiting other deduction on this form. Temporary detail is another one that we're going to be looking for. This is for work performed on another route that is not normally assigned to the carrier. Okay, next slide. Backtracking is for going back to a missed delivery. This is one we're going to take a closer look at in a moment. Replenishing mail. This is moving or staging mail so that it can be easily accessed. We do this during the course of the day. We bring parcels up front as we go through and deliver. This time should not be taken from a carrier. Management time. This is a dangerous deduction. Instruct your carriers not to engage in idle conversation with members of the inspection team while they're delivering their route. Also, do not take comfort stops at the same time as a route inspector if possible. We're going to look at why that can hurt you. Reasonable personal needs time should not be deducted. Then there's customer contact. This is a daily part of our jobs, and this should not be deducted. You're going to get examiners that try to pull this time away from us. Fight back on that every time. And miscellaneous other, this is for any other deduction that does not fit in one of the categories above. And again, this should have explanations provided for each deduction. All right, let's look at a 3999 and how we spot these deductions. Now, the cover sheet of the 3999 is a summary. This is on the left, and we should compare this with the actual clock ring entries. This cover page has checkmark areas to note any carrier or route deficiencies, and in the remarks section, it should tell us whether the regular or replacement carrier serviced the route. On the second page to the right in the same slide is an example that we created of a 3999. Now, typically, there'll be several of these pages as the segments of the route are listed off. We have a few of our red flags to look at here. We're going to go through them on this 3999. Okay, first of all, we see awaiting other on load time for using personal needs stops after loading the vehicle. This is a problem for us. If we did our ground rules correctly, any personal need time while on the street should not be deducted. This is a red flag. Next is a backtracking for a parcel with no time entered for the actual delivery itself. That delivery time is missing for this carrier. Then there's a waiting other attached to the carrier's lunchtime. We would need to find out if that may have been a wash-up or something else that wasn't recorded by the examiner. Going down the page next is the management time right before a carrier personal needs time. Now again, we need to find out if the carrier was physically doing nothing whatsoever except waiting for this examiner to use the restroom. Otherwise, that time should not be deducted. And here below is a waiting other for traffic. This is a good one. We encounter traffic every day on our routes. And unless there's an accident or something extraordinary out there, that time should not be deducted. For instance, being behind a school bus, that's a traffic issue that we see on a normal basis. That time is not being taken from a carrier. Down further, we have a relay time entry. We should make sure that this is a park and loop route the minute we see that, because relay time would not be entered for any type of delivery other than park and loops. This is important because relay time is not for going through markups and undeliverable mail after a relay or central delivery location. We don't want this time touched in the core adjustments. And lastly, we have mail replenishment. As long as there's no deduction, we're okay with this one. Okay, next slide. Now, don't be nervous. This is what those red flags look like now that they're buried in sector segment data. So this is pretty messy, right? The advice I would give a steward is to go through every page of a 3999 and circle the red flags that we just talked about, just like you see some circled here, and the comments as they're attached. Then you can go back and research them each one by one. In this example, the first management line entry is probably appropriate if the carrier obligations are read off from the M39, as they usually are. The second circled management time is the carrier using a restroom while on loading time. This should be a violation of our ground rules, of course, but at the very least a violation of our right to reasonable comfort stops under M39 section 242.341. The next management deduction is for a restroom break for management. Here we need to question the carrier to make sure they use the restroom at the same time. In that case, only any additional time used by the examiner while the carrier waited should be deducted. On the next page on the right, we have the correct example of a backtrack event. The carrier missed a delivery, so they had to travel back for 14 seconds. Then they made the actual delivery, which they got credit for. Then they ended the backtrack by returning to the previous location for 18 seconds. There should rarely be a backtrack entry standing alone. The final circled waiting other event on this page has no comments explaining the deduction. We would request this information, and a carrier would also request this deduction in their consultation on Form 1840. Now, there's one more here that wasn't circled, but that we should look at too. It's around 7 lines down from the last entry circled on the right. There's a travel within attached to a personal needs stop. Now, we're not traveling to a park and loop servicing point when we use a restroom, so this should be fought and removed. Personal needs time starts when you leave your delivery point and ends when you return to it. Travel within will be deducted in the core adjustments, as we explained earlier, so this part of our personal needs time would be taken away as well if we don't dispute it. Okay, next slide. One of the resources that we can request is the audit trail report. This will show us most of the deductions made on a 3999 evaluation. It's a good way to double check our work. The first column in the audit trail report is the version number. The highest number for each entry is the latest version of the event and the final entry that was registered. So if there's only a version 1 in the audit trail entry for something, that time was deleted altogether. For example, the first entry in this report has a version 1 and a version 2 for the Ledgewood Way sector segment. So the 8 minutes and 14 seconds in version 2 is the correct entry, and the 14 seconds in version 1 was deleted. So the second example for collection time only has the version 1 entry, so that was actually just simply deleted. So this form isn't hard to read once you figure that part of it out. All right, on our next slide. This is the DOIS 3999 function analysis screenshot. This is an important resource for stewards to request, and I'm telling you, management's going to tell you this doesn't exist. They can't print this out. They can, and you can show them this slideshow and tell them exactly what it looks like. Now, you can see in the column on the right, this lists non-recurring street times, and this lists most of our red flag deductions that we just talked about. Everything in this section, in this right-hand column, is deducted from a carrier's route except for replenish time, which is the last entry at the bottom. Okay, slide 39. Okay, who wants to solve a crime with us? We can already suspect that our thief will be management, but let's investigate and find some evidence. So this is going to be the case of the mysterious disappearing break time. M39, section 242.241, Allied Street Work Rules. The carriers at the delivery unit will receive 2 10-minute break periods. The local union may annually opt to have either A, both breaks on the street, or B, on one of the street breaks will be in the office and the other will be on the street. Now, if the two 10-minute breaks are taken on the street, they will be separate from each other. Breaks must be separate from the lunch period. The carrier shall record on PS Form 1564A delivery instructions the approximate location of the breaks. Reasonable comfort stops will not be deducted from the carrier's actual time. Okay, the document right under that, M00230, this is a signed memorandum and it's binding on the parties. Under the terms of the national agreement, letter carriers are entitled to two 10-minute break periods. If less than this is incorporated into the routes, appropriate action should be initiated to ascertain that the break time is reflected in the route adjustments. Management does not have the contractual right to deny the utilization of these breaks. Okay, our next slide. So we're going to have to request a few things to solve this crime. We're going to need to request copies of the DOAS function analysis and DOAS data summary screenshots. We're going to look at both of those in a minute. We also need forms 1838C and 1840B for each, and we're going to look at those as well. And finally, we'll need to examine carrier comments, whether it's from a form 3999X or a separate notation that they've created, and statements from our letter carriers. Also, one more thing I want to notate here, and I want you to remember, the data summary slide we're going to look at in a moment, this has the percent of deliveries made for the route on the day of that inspection on the street. This is very important to remember. This is the easiest place to get the percent delivery that we made on a given day. Okay, slide 41. Okay, we're back on the 3999 function analysis screen. Let's look at the other street time detail tab in the middle. You see those two blue arrows there? One at the top, this is a street break time. The big fat zero there. This number should never be zero. This time may have been skipped by a carrier. Maybe they skipped a break or two because they were nervous, but that time should have been edited back in, as we just saw from our handbook and contract manual language. For office break routes, there should be a 10-minute time there at the least, and for street break routes, where both routes are taken on the street, there should be 20 minutes entered in that column. So we can see in that bottom arrow that that zero entry factored into the 1 hour, 9 minutes, and 49 seconds that totaled out that street time detail. Okay, next slide. Now this is the 3999 data summary screenshot we just talked about a second ago. Our steward should be requesting this as well. Here we see that the 1 hour, 9 minute, 49 seconds that we just looked at, this was put into the final gross time for this route. So this route lost at least 10 minutes of time, maybe 20. This is just one 3999 for one day. Each route could have up to 3 of these conducted during an inspection. So when we attack this in our grievance, this could likely be one of those that we see a widespread occurrence. Also here on the right, that arrow that it's pointing out to the middle section, this is the percentage delivery. This is the easiest place for us to access this info. Okay, on our next slide, let's look at forms 1840 and 1840B. This is going to show us days that are removed or bracketed from delivery. In this example, you can see that all of the delivery time, you can see this in the left 2 arrows, was removed for both Saturday and Thursday. So was this abbreviated Saturday route? Is that why this Saturday time was bracketed? Was the steward off on a Thursday? Was the Saturday time accidentally removed and we don't know about it? This is something that the steward's going to have to research on Form 1838 and 1838C that we just went through to see which carrier was assigned to the route on those days. Now we also see here the bottom 2 arrows on the right. These are the final comparisons of the 1840B 8-week analysis and the week of inspection. So this is going to be important later on, because when we're looking at which time was chosen, if it was the latest or lowest time, that's going to be where we find that number. Okay, slide 44. Let's look at the 1840B 8-week analysis. This is a historical look at a random 8 weeks of data on a route. So the inspection team did not personally witness the carrier performing their job on these random weeks. So they didn't see carriers wasting time on the street or taking an extended break. There's very limited opportunities to reduce time. So what could they possibly screw up, right? Well, let's take a look at 4 of the big ones. First of all, auxiliary assistance time not added into the route, and this is per M39 section 213. You stewards are not going to believe how prevalent this is when we look at this in a minute. 1840B days deleted as not representative. Next, we could have abbreviated Saturday times remaining in an evaluation because those should be pulled out for Saturdays, and improperly bracketed days or listing of a replacement carrier in place of a regular carrier. These are the 4 big hitters, folks. Okay, next slide. Who wants to solve another crime? Let's do this. We know who did this again, right? We know management stole from a carrier. Let's look at an 1840B analysis. Now, this slide right here, this is an actual 1840B analysis. This is nothing that was made up. This is the real deal. You're going to see what they did here. There are 6 days here. You can see these 6 arrows that are evaluated during the random 8-week analysis, but they were removed. You can also see a big white space there on the left page in the middle. This is where multiple days had no entries by the carrier. So these days were removed by the inspection team and not credited to our weeks. We're going to have to go back and research those days to see if the carrier actually carried the route on those 5 missing days on that Monday right there. So look at those 6 arrows again. We see some days crossed out here, quite a few, 6 of them. So if you notice, most of these crossed out days, we're going to go to the next slide. We're going to blow up these numbers for you because it's a little hard to read. If you look at these 6 crossed out days, most of these are the highest value days in the data set. Complete coincidence that management took away our highest delivery days. But the result is that the time for each of those days is brought down. Now, next slide. Okay, let's look at the, go back to that slide one more time, I'm sorry. We have an 8.32 and an 8.13 hour on Saturday. You see that right there on that Saturday delivery? We're going to look at that in a minute. Those stand out, right? Look at this, a 4.89 day deleted too. Do you see that 4.89? That is a low day. Now, if we look at this, you know, that if they leave that day untouched and they take that 4.98 out, we're thinking that looks pretty good, right? Let's look at the next slide. Okay, this is the final page of the 1840B analysis. I want to give you a word of warning. You should manually write the route number on this page since it's not listed anywhere. It's easy when you're shoving papers around to misplace which of these routes it belongs to. And believe me, it's much easier to get that out of the way right away and put that route number right on this one like we did. Also very important, stewards must request the 1840B analysis in any edited versions. When we go through this form, you're going to see some lined out entries, just like you see some handwritten entries here. You're not going to get those if you request the 1840B analysis alone. Now, pay attention to this. If you request an 1840B analysis, you're going to get this paper with no deductions. You need to request the edited versions, all edited versions. This is especially true for abbreviated Saturday routes because the Saturday time for these routes should be bracketed right on this last page. Okay, another important point. The data in the 1840B changes from hundreds to minutes midway through the form. We're going to look at that in a minute. This is a very confusing point where stewards ask a lot of questions. We're going to hit on that for you. Okay, so in this example on this page right here, we can see that every day's average was reduced in time because of the eliminated high delivery days we just looked at, except for Monday. Looks like Monday's time increased by 1 hour and 1 minute. So if you look at this, it nearly eliminated all of the other deductions. The net change to the 8-week average at the bottom of the page here is only, 3 minutes. It went from 7:14 to 7:11. That's not a big change. So we can almost miss that if we don't pay attention. We're not going to let them pull this over on us, brothers and sisters. We're going to take a closer look. Next slide. Let's look at that Monday time one more time. Okay, you can see that 4.89 hours again that was crossed out and deducted, right? This leaves 7.48 and 8.46 street times remaining to give us an average. Looking down that column, that brought up the average to 7.97 hours or 7 hours and 58 minutes. Now, this is where our conversion to hundreds and minutes takes place, right at the bottom of every day's column. So we see that 7 minute and 58 seconds is transposed over, but hold on. Let's look back at the Monday times. Do you see that column at the top with the arrow that's pointed from right to left? That's auxiliary assistance. Follow that arrow down. there's a 4.42 hour auxiliary assistance provided to this route on that Monday. This is the time that must be manually added in by the inspection team and was not. Instead, they eliminated what would have been our highest value day for the Monday set altogether. So what's the result? Let's look at this next slide. When we add the 9.31 hour day back into our Mondays, our average for the Monday didn't just go up to 7 hours and 58 minutes. It went all the way up to 8 hours and 25 minutes. That brought the total average of our route up to 7 hours and 29 minutes if you take away all of the other deleted routes that were just deleted deleted times because they were the highest days of the week. So brothers and sisters, we need to sit back and think about what almost happened here. This route went from 7 hours and 11 minutes to 7 hours and 29 minutes. That's 18 minutes that we added to this route evaluation all by itself. More importantly, it wouldn't take much footwork now to find missing time and keep this as an 8-hour assignment, as opposed to 7 hours, 11 minutes. We have a long way to go. And in that case, we would lose a route. But what if the average time in the 1840B had not changed? What if it had remained at 7:14? Would we have looked twice? What if we hadn't asked for any edited copies of the 1840B? What if there was nothing lined out at all and the 7:14 was unchanged? We would have never known what just happened to this route, and we would have lost 18 minutes to this route. So reminder, we need those edited versions. Please, all edited versions of the 1840B, don't forget this. Now, this is the best way to research 1840B times. I know this is a confusing form. We just took a look at it. The best way to do this, get a highlighter. Go through the form 4 times. First, look page by page down the auxiliary assistance column we just looked at and highlight any entries. Then go back to the beginning and highlight any days that were crossed out by management that we just looked at. All those 6 days that were lined out, highlight all of those. Then go back down each page one more time and highlight any street times that look out of place, such as that 4.89 Monday time. Now for our 4th time, we start over. And page by page, now you can look at your highlighted notes. If you have unusually low days with no auxiliary assistance noted, you might have to go back and research the daily work schedule or employee everything report. You need to find out if the carrier clockering entries show the aux time and it wasn't recorded properly by management. Okay, our next slide. One final form I'd like to take a look at is the 1840 reverse. This form shows the edits made to each route. The relief or addition column indicates if a segment was added or removed, but we also need to look for reasons why days were excluded from the 1840B analysis, and that's in the comment section right there at the bottom. You see the reason here? They were deducted because the days were not representative. This is the common excuse. Stewards should look at the days deducted to see if any days equally lower from the days were taken out from the average than were higher. We should also make a list of all days excluded from consideration from the 1840B analysis, all the routes, to present in our grievance. Because if, for instance, management deleted 100 days of consideration, an arbitrator is going to find that pretty interesting. We also see on this form, on the bottom, the reason on whether the week of inspection or the 1840B analysis was chosen to evaluate the route. The common notation we're going to see here is that the week of inspection is more representative because it was in a controlled environment. Well, listen, brothers and sisters, a good steward's going to point out that this excuse doesn't hold any water. We live in a GPS-controlled environment with our scanners on our sides all day long. So that is a bogus excuse. We're going to argue that. They're not going to take our lowest times with that excuse. Okay, so that wraps up the forms that I wanted to talk about. Next, we're going to hear from Bill Kriebel to talk to us a little bit about grieving broad categories of deductions, some procedural deficiencies during the inspection process itself, and what kind of remedies we can request in our grievance inspection process. So, Bill, take it away, brother.
All right, thanks, Paul. So let's talk about some categories where carriers lose large amounts of time. We'll go through some bullet points. Our first bullet point is the ground rules violations. Okay, so one of our potential large grievance categories will be for violations of our ground rules. We need to remember that each time a signed agreement is violated, we have a stronger case. List every ground rule and each example of where it was violated. This is where your daily notes from the 1838C violations will come in handy. The contractual violation you should cite here would be Article 15.3, bargaining in good faith. Our next bullet point, another easy to recognize violation would be where management completes the Form 1838C on the days that a carrier should have done so. If you've requested color copies of the 1838C forms, flip through them to look for the red entries in the afternoon. Don't think for a moment that management is doing your carriers a favor by completing this form. Carriers generally return at the same time in the afternoon and stand in line to clear their accountable mail. So all this line 14 time is now in the hands of a route examiner to enter accurately. Additionally, carriers should have line 21 time and markup entries to make each day. Assemble all instances of this occurring and make it an exhibit in your grievance. Next, we have compliance with previous grievance decisions. If your office has filed and prevailed in the grievances for route inspection violations, and the remedies call for compliance, then these can be used in cite in Article 15 grievance as well. Okay, line 21 items. Line 21 for filling out 3996s, wash-up time, and steward time will likely be challenged by management. If there are enough denied line 21 occurrences in your inspection, they could be grouped together to show a pattern. These could also fall under ground rule agreement violations. Saturday abbreviated delivery routes are another place where we can lose a lot of time as well. There may not be many abbreviated Saturday deductions, but each one will likely carry a large value of time deducted from the route. If there were violations of the M39 and applying with abbreviated Saturday rules, we may want to make this a category. Carrier statements are good to have here as well. Management is notorious for providing notes or explanations on expense forms or time deductions. So let's be clear. Management is contractually obligated to provide justification for the deductions to a carrier's office or street time. Carriers don't need to request for very reason for a deduction to be given. It is a requirement. There is a provision. However, if a carrier does request missing notes for deductions to their route in writing on the 1840 duration during the consultation, they must be provided within 7 days or the deduction will not apply. But this does not excuse the original obligation to provide these notes. These missing reasons for deductions can add up quickly. List them all. Provide the color copies of the Form 1838C and the 3999 edited versions in your evidence. Missing ox time during the 8-week analysis is a common issue. Paul already went over how to recognize if the auxiliary time was not added to the 1840B times, and this is one of the largest losses of time to the 8-week analysis. Our next bullet point looks at mail curtailed or not passed out in the inspection. This is not a common violation to discover, but if there is mail that is found to be held back or not delivered during the route inspection, it will likely have a large impact. Get a piece count of delayed mail for every route if possible. Our last category of the violation is improper omitting of the entire day in an inspection. If there are days removed from the 1840B analysis not representative, or if days are bracketed or not considered where the carrier actually was on their route, this will be a significant violation to bring attention to. There will be more categories or violations for each route inspection where management showcases their incompetence. Search them out and bring them into the sunlight for an arbitrator to see. Next slide, please. All right, so let's look at some of the procedural errors that can take place during the route inspection. Our slideshow will also give you the contractual references to put into your grievance. So first, was the dry run done correctly? Well, obviously we want the dry run to be timely. If it's done too far in advance, our carriers will forget the process and need more instruction to make their mistakes. Our next bullet point deals with the carriers' consultations. Carriers must have their comments considered during the consultation and entered on the 1840 reverse. Was the carrier given a copy of the Forms 1840 not less than 1 day prior to the consultation? Was the carrier given the copies of the Form 1838 at least 5 days prior to the consultation? These are questions. Next, was a proper unit review conducted? The unit review should be conducted yearly and should identify, among other things, work hours, volumes, possible deliveries. They should also identify adjustments to routes that should be taken to maintain efficient service. The reviews should be shared with the NELC branch president and the individual carriers. Unit reviews provide the basis for the route inspections, and we should argue that the random route inspections are not contractual. So, was local management used in this inspection? Local management will have a better knowledge of procedure. Stewards should argue that local supervisors are familiar with routes and could spot errors that were overlooked by an inspection team. As an example, local management may be aware that a route gets auxiliary assistance every day and will know to look for and add this time to the 1840B evaluation. Let's look at changes to the distribution procedures. Did the clerk change the way that they passed out or prepared mail? Are spurs now handed out to the carriers or segregated from the parcels where they were mixed in with them prior? Well, we have covered missing components in our last set of bullet points, but it's also can be considered a flaw in the process itself, since carriers can't dispute what they don't know. Comments for 1838C deductions under line 21 and 22 are required, whether the carrier asks for them or not. Failing to provide them is a violation every time. Next, did management consistently choose the lowest time to evaluate routes? Well, can we show the lowest time for route evaluations? We're chosen every time on the most of the time. Out of all inspected routes, how many had the lowest time selected? Was mail volume representative during the week of inspection? And look at the Form 1840 to compare values for the week's inspections in the 8-week analysis. Let's also look at the implementations of the newly adjusted routes. Implementations of any route adjustment must take place within 52 days after the 8-week of evaluation, which follows the actual week of inspection. Implementation cannot place between November 15th and January 1st. Other than that, the union should be notified promptly and exceptions must be approved by the district manager and must be for valid operational circumstances. Whether inspections were done properly or not, a grievance should be filed for implementation delays. Carrier statements on harm are important here and can support financial remedies. We'll look at potential remedies in a minute. We gave you the language from the M39 in our slide presentation, but Memorandum M-01072 is a good reference to add to this grievance category as well. So please add that to your list. I'll read it again, M-01072. All right, so core adjustments are another important part of the grievance process that we should not be overlooked. So, if we had an NELC core advisor who sat in during the adjustment, was their input considered? We should also look here on whether the 3999 closest to the selected street time was used to adjust territory per M01777. Was outlay time transferred properly to the new route? And our last bullet point under procedural topics is the conduct of management during the inspection. Ethical conduct charges would have to support that management had an intent to violate the contract to achieve an improper evaluation on these routes. This is easy to assume but difficult to prove. So get a second set of eyes before moving this charge forward. But conduct grievances can also be filed when management gives improper instructions to the carrier or is bullying to make them numbers take place. Next slide. As discussed at the beginning of the training, a second grievance should be filed in the 60-day review. shows that the routes were not properly evaluated to as close to 8 hours as possible. This is an easy grievance to file, and the contract language is clear. M39 section 242.122 states, the proper adjustment of carrier routes mean an equitable and feasible division of work among all the carrier routes assigned to the office. All regular routes should consist of as nearly 8 hours daily work as possible. Section 242.614 states that under delivery point sequence, within 60 days of implementing the planned adjustment to ensure that the routes are as near as 8 hours daily as possible. So the M39 language here states that the review will take place within 60 days, not after. Next slide, please. Following a 60-day period of time, the new routes are put in place. We should request a work hour workload report for all inspection routes for a 2-week period prior to the 60 days. If we are not provided with it, we are looking at column 3 here. First, the actual total column shows that the average daily hours for each route. This alone does not tell the whole story, though, because the 8-hour evaluation may not be 8 hours after adjusted for mail volume. The new projected route time based on the volume can be found in the second column under projected totals. The third column, labeled total variance, is where we will see true picture of the route evaluation. For correctly adjusted routes, this number should be as close to 0. A steward should make 2 arguments here. The first, that the individual route are out of adjustment. Choose some glaring examples and get carrier statements. Make sure carriers explain the harm that they experienced from the improperly adjusted routes. Were they mandated? Did anyone lose a bid assignment during the route revisions? No questionnaire type handouts. Each carrier should write down their own statement. Next, we should cite the total variance for all route inspections. In our example, there is an average of 16.46 overage of hours over the expected unit total. If 2 routes were removed from this unit due to this inspection, and we are shown those exact numbers of hours still being worked, well, we have a very strong argument that the entire inspection should be overturned. If you find evidence that routes are not evaluated to 8 hours in the work hour workload reports, then you should also include the employee everything clock ring reports in your evidence for the grievance. We want to show evidence that the actual times entered by the carriers proves our argument. A last point on this grievance, the incident date listed on your grievance form should be continuing. Every day that these routes are improperly adjusted is another day of the violation taking place. So, all right, let's take a look at some of the remedies. All right, so cease and desist that's an important remedy in the route inspection grievances. There are usually enough mistakes made by management to support this remedy, but we need to make the argument. This is important because we're going to see the same gains from management every time, and we want to have a remedy that will lead to enforcement. We also don't want any corrupt data to be used as part of the route evaluation, so that has to be included as well. Financial remedies are great, but not always warranted. So look at your own circumstances in the history of any previous violations in your office. And please be sure to consider and discuss these in your remedies. Any harm to carriers if someone lost a route or was mandated and missed family events, we want to address that damage. We can emphasize enough that statements from your carriers can make all the difference of all these remedies. If the union had a file on inspection violations before we have prevailed it may be appropriate to ask for compensation to the branch for having more grievances all the way through the arbitration. Lastly, for whatever a Step B team or arbitrator deems appropriate, this is important language because it gives the flexibility for a Step B team or an arbitrator to award partial remedy instead of all or nothing. Remedies may vary, so don't be afraid to ask guidance from your regional or national team on how high that you should aim these. So with all that being said, Paul, back to you.
All right, all right. So we have got some great questions and answers that have come in. Let's look at a couple here. I'm really excited that a lot of people are focusing on these ground rules. That's really important. We've had some questions on will they be posted or will they be in a PDF format? Can we get a list of the ground rules? We are going to provide that for you, probably in a couple of formats. This is something you should be carrying with you to every inspection. So 100% we're going to get these to you, folks. Okay, another question. How can I get the routes that are noted within management as an abbreviated route? I asked this question to our steward, current president, and his reply was, I believe during our last inspection, 2020, only one route was listed as an abbreviated route. So what I would do is, when the inspection team comes into an office, they are going to have access to 7 weeks out of the 8-week analysis. As soon as you pick those random 8 weeks, they're going to pull the 7 weeks. Ask for those 7 weeks. Look at the Saturday times. If you have historical Saturday times that are lower than every other day of the week by, say, 15 or 20 minutes, you're going to have a solid argument there. And this is in the random data. You could go back historically, too, and get like a work hour workload from a year ago or a period of time, maybe a month, to show that it's consistent. But those are a couple ways you can get that information. Okay, let's see. There was another good one here. What would refueling the vehicle be considered? Refueling the vehicle on a $39.99 is going to say just that, refueling the vehicle. The catch here is that time is divided by 6 for the 6 delivery days of the week. So you want to make sure that if the refueling is done while a substitute carrier is on the route, that time gets factored over. Now, here's another one. Oh, this is a good question. I've been told that auxiliary assistance doesn't count for the regular carrier for the purpose of an 8-week analysis. Is this true? I have 2 carriers in our count in 2 weeks that have given away a pivot or daily hour or more because they have 8-hour medical restrictions. What do I do about it? Okay, so auxiliary time absolutely is added back into the route, but what management is supposed to do is they're supposed to take that time that was carried by another carrier and get that same segment of time and relate it to what the regular carrier has taken in the past to deliver that piece of the route. So the answer is yes, it should be added back in, but it should be the regular carrier's time that's added back into the route. Okay, so another one, if 20 minutes for abbreviated Saturday delivery is close for a Saturday route, should we always argue for abbreviated delivery for a specific route? My general guideline is 20 minutes. I'm sure if you get a route inspection team come in and they give you their ground rules, they're going to say an hour. That's ridiculous. If it's 20 minutes and that makes a significant impact to the route, we should fight for that. So 20 minutes is my general guideline. You could fight for 15 minutes if you want to, but of course, the lower you go, the less impact it's going to make and the more variance you're going to see where it might not even be deducted every week because it'll be higher than other days. Okay, what handbook or manual can I find the information about ground rules? That's great. You're not going to find that language. Ground rule agreements are actually almost like an LMOU. It's an agreement that you're making with the Postal Service. It's going to be a binding agreement. It's going to be a signed agreement. So this is almost a memorandum that you're signing with the parties before the actual inspection. And let me see, can management use CCA time if they are on a mini bid? So if a regular carrier is not available during the week of inspection, you're going to ask for a qualified regular carrier to do that route. Now, there is a report in DOAS, I'm not sure what it's called, but you can actually look at how often a carrier has done a route. So if you pull that and the carrier hasn't done the route in the past year, I would say they're not a qualified replacement. This is another spot where maybe you can make this another ground rule where the union and management will decide on qualified replacement carriers and any disputes will be handled locally, something like that. I did have a question that was outside of this chat that I'm going to ask you. We had a question, what if an inspection team comes in and they tell the branch president or the stewards, we're looking at taking 6 routes out of this office. If you give us 2, we'll go away. Well, I think my argument and everyone on this team here with us, they're going to tell you that doesn't wash. You have to fight for your time. And I'm telling you, if you look at these trainings that we put on and what we've showed you how to do, you're going to show time for a carrier. A friend of mine said it best. When we go into inspection training and inspections, we're going to war. Management's trying to take territory. We're trying to save territory. So you should never give it away. I mean, the minute you start giving time away, even if it's a good idea, you're setting a precedent. They're going to come back and do it again. So it's pretty much like a shark in the water. You don't want to cut yourself and start bleeding because you're just asking for more. So that kind of wraps it up for the questions that I can see. Let me check one more time here. Yeah, somebody asked if we're going to have these slides available to download. Yes, we are. They're going to be posted, I think, shortly on a couple of social media sites. And I think that wraps up our questions, folks. So I'm going to turn this back to James Henry, but I want to thank you for joining us here today, all of you, and we appreciate you each and every single day. Thank you again, brothers and sisters.
My brothers and sisters, thank you, as Paul indicated, and fantastic job by Paul, Bill, and Walt. The information was very comprehensive. I do want to inform you guys that we will have some more training coming up here that's going to be dealing with house to work environment and the JSOB here within the next month or so. So be on the lookout for that. I do want to take the opportunity for everyone to remember our brother that was involved in an accident and unfortunately passed yesterday in Houston, Texas. So can we take a moment and have a moment of silence for that brother? Much for that. Nevertheless, here again, thank you for taking your time on Sunday. I know it's football season, and I know that everyone has worked hard all during the course of the week, and for you to take your time to spend a couple of hours with us today means the world, and it shows that we do have union brothers and sisters that are really about representing our letter carriers as we are as well. All right. For that, anyone else had any other questions before we go? If not, you will be able to find this information on YouTube and also our Facebook, and you'll be able to get this information, and you can feel free to reach out to us anytime if you have any difficulties trying to get it. And that's this and past trainings as well. All right, everyone, take care and God bless.